They say behind every great man is a greater woman. But sometimes, she's not standing behind him. She's watching. Waiting. Planning. For 18 years, Olivia Carrington played the perfect wife. Graceful. Polished. Quietly powerful. She hosted the galas, raised their twins, and never missed a beat beside tech mogul Nathan Carrington, the man the world admired. But what the world didn't know is that Olivia was never just a wife in the shadows, she was the strategist behind the curtain. So when Nathan strutted into their company's 30th anniversary gala with a 27-year-old pregnant mistress on his arm, thinking he held all the cards, he had no idea he had already lost the game. What happened next wasn't rage. It wasn't scandal. It was execution. In front of a room full of shareholders, board members, and their teenage children, Olivia unfolded a quiet storm of betrayal, embezzlement, and a legal clause buried deep in a trust Nathan never bothered to read. And by the time dessert hit the table, the empire Nathan built was no longer his. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the stakes. Stick around, because this isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a masterclass in revenge, grace, and reclaiming power the smart way. The Artemis Tower shimmered against the San Francisco skyline like a jewel set in steel, its 73rd floor reserved that night for the 30th anniversary gala of Carrington Global. Every inch of the ballroom was flawless. White orchids cascaded down crystal columns. Floor-length windows framed the city like a living portrait. The lighting was warm but deliberate, gold, like legacy. Legacy was what the night was about. And Olivia Carrington was its architect. She moved through the room with the grace of a queen and the precision of an engineer. Every plate, every glass, every bottle of wine had passed her silent approval. She'd spent the last 3 months designing this evening down to the second. Not just because it was important for optics, not just because of reputation, but because something deep inside her had shifted. It started as a whisper, barely audible even to herself. A gut feeling. A silence too loud. Nathan had been distant lately. Busier than usual. Longer flights, later nights. But that wasn't what worried her. It was what he stopped saying. He used to brag about every deal. Every acquisition. Now, he spoke in summaries and dismissals. Nothing major. Just routine. He stopped looking her in the eye when he answered questions. His phone, once carelessly tossed on the kitchen counter, now never left his pocket. When she reached for it once, jokingly, to order food, he had stiffened. And that was the moment her heart began taking notes. Olivia wasn't a woman prone to paranoia. She was sharp. Calculated. She didn't jump to conclusions, she gathered data. She started reading old board reports, cross-checking expense logs. She noticed the Singapore project, a venture Nathan had dismissed as oversaturated just 2 years ago, had suddenly become urgent, even secretive. But tonight wasn't about evidence. Not yet. Tonight was a test. And Nathan was failing it. The gala had started at 7. By 7:15, most of the board was present. The tech division head, the CFO, the investors from Dubai, all in place. Their teenage twins, Jackson and Lila, stood on either side of Olivia like quiet sentinels. They'd inherited their mother's eyes, their father's ambition, and, after the last few weeks, her curiosity. But still, no Nathan. Her assistant had texted him. Twice. Still in meetings, came the reply. It wasn't just the lateness. It was the silence. Nathan Carrington was never silent. He was a man who made entrances, not apologies. And right now, he was 42 minutes late to the most important night of their professional lives. A soft voice broke through Olivia's thoughts. Everything looks beautiful, Mom. Lila. 17, stunning, brilliant, still young enough to believe things fell into place because they were meant to. Olivia smiled. Thank you. Now go grab some sparkling cider before the servers think we're running dry. Lila walked off, and Olivia turned to Jackson. You still feel it? She asked him quietly. Jackson nodded. Something's off. People are starting to notice. Exactly. Olivia's gaze swept the room. She could feel it in the way conversations were clipped. How the investors kept checking their watches, whispering among themselves. Even the music, soft jazz curated to exude confidence, suddenly felt theatrical, like it was hiding something. Ms. Carrington, one of the servers, approached her, concern on her face. Shall we begin the first course? Olivia paused. Every instinct told her yes. Control the room. Move forward. But something inside her, that steady voice of intuition that had never failed her, said, wait. No, she replied. Hold for another 10 minutes. Let's not give him the grand entrance he wants. The server nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Nathan's assistant hadn't returned texts in the last 20 minutes. His executive assistant had called in sick that morning. Their private driver reported he hadn't picked up Mr. Carrington that day. Too many inconsistencies. Too many silences. And then, just as the clock struck 8:01, the double doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. And the storm stepped in. Nathan Carrington. Impeccably dressed. Unbothered. Confident. But not alone. On his arm was a woman Olivia had never seen before. Younger. Barely older than Lila. With a curve-hugging red gown and a bump that could only mean one thing, 5 months, maybe 6. The entire room stopped breathing. Olivia didn't blink. Nathan didn't even flinch. He led the woman in as if he were introducing royalty. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice amplified by years of commanding boardrooms, apologies for the delay. I'd like you all to meet Lena Wu, our new director of East Asia Strategy. And, he paused, his eyes locking with Olivia's, the mother of our future heir. He said it as if it were a toast. As if he were gifting the room a future. And still, Olivia didn't move. Because she knew now, everything. The gut feeling. The whispers. The altered files. The late nights and sudden trips to Hong Kong. She didn't need confirmation anymore. He'd betrayed her. Publicly. Boldly. And fatally. Because what Nathan didn't know was that Olivia Carrington never started a war without already winning it first. She turned slowly, gracefully, and offered Lena a calm, practiced smile. Welcome to the gala, Miss Wu. Please, come sit beside me. And just like that, the tension in the room snapped into a new kind of silence. Not awkward. Not confused. Terrified. Because everyone who had ever seen Olivia Carrington host an event knew, she only invited people to sit beside her when they were about to be part of something unforgettable. And this night, this flawless, gold-washed night, was just beginning. The moment Nathan Carrington stepped into the ballroom, the entire atmosphere shifted. The lighting didn't change, the music didn't pause, but somehow, everything felt different. Eyes turned. Voices dropped. You could almost hear the collective inhale of disbelief. Nathan stood tall, the classic image of a Silicon Valley titan, perfectly tailored midnight blue tux, salt and pepper hair styled to deliberate perfection, a custom Carrington pin glittering against his lapel. He looked like the king of his empire. But he wasn't alone. The woman on his arm didn't belong to the story people knew. She wasn't Olivia Carrington, the First Lady of Carrington Global. She wasn't an investor, a family member, or even a familiar face in their executive lineup. She was young, very young. Maybe 27. Barely older than their daughter Lila. Her gown was red. Not crimson. Not burgundy. Fire engine red. The kind of red that doesn't ask permission. It hugged every curve of her body, dipping low in front and back. But all eyes drifted, inevitably, to the unmistakable swell of her belly. She was very pregnant. And she was very much not hiding it. Behind Nathan's self-assured smile, Olivia noticed the details, the way his hand was slightly too tight on Lena's arm. The way Lena's smile was polished but brittle. The way their entrance had been timed, exactly at the moment the first course should have been served. He had planned this. Every second of it. "Good evening, everyone," Nathan announced, his voice booming with performative ease. "Apologies for our delay. We had a rather important matter to finalize before joining you." The room said nothing. It didn't need to. This wasn't a boardroom. This was a bomb site, and everyone was bracing for the aftershock. "I'd like to introduce someone very special," Nathan continued, glancing toward the sea of stunned faces. "This is Lena Wu, Director of East Asian Strategy at Carrington Global, and the future mother of our next generation." He let it hang there. "Not my child. Our next generation." It was a sentence crafted for legacy. One that would echo through investor memos and press releases. One that dared the audience to cheer or choke. From the edge of the room, the company's general counsel looked like he'd just swallowed a stapler. Olivia did not flinch. Instead, she stepped forward with the precision of a stage veteran. Each movement deliberate, fluid, powerful. And she smiled. Not the brittle kind of smile that masked heartbreak. No. This was the smile of a woman who knew something no one else in the room did. She walked directly toward Nathan and Lena, heels silent against the polished marble. "Miss Wu," she said warmly, extending a hand with absolute calm. "Welcome. I'm Olivia Carrington. Please, join me at the center table." The room exhaled, but it was an exhale of confusion. Was this acceptance? Lena hesitated. Her eyes darted to Nathan. He gave a subtle nod. Olivia turned to the servers, her voice clear. "Let's begin with the first course. And do bring Mr. Carrington his usual, Pinot, 2012. You'll find a bottle already decanted." As the servers rushed to obey, Olivia gestured toward the seat next to hers, the one reserved for honored guests. Lena took it, nervously smoothing her dress over her belly. Nathan looked puzzled. This was not the humiliation he had predicted. He remained standing, a wineglass untouched in front of him. His gaze shifted between his wife and his mistress, one calm, one visibly rattled. "Are you okay?" Lena whispered, leaning toward him. "She seems fine," Nathan muttered, a line of tension appearing between his brows. "She's just processing." But Olivia wasn't processing. She was preparing. As the appetizers were served, Olivia turned the spotlight onto Lena with grace and subtle precision. "So, Miss Wu," she said, folding her napkin with elegance. "I understand you're heading our expansion into Shanghai?" Lena nodded, cautiously. "Yes, I've been leading research into cultural integration and luxury branding for the region." Olivia smiled. "That's a complex market. It requires deep understanding, both linguistically and culturally." "Where did you study?" "Harvard Business School," Lena said. "Hamilton Fellowship." A few board members raised their brows, murmurs of impressed approval rippling through the table. "Impressive," Olivia said, pouring Lena a glass of water. "And when did you join Carrington Global?" "Almost 2 years ago," Lena replied. "And you and Nathan," Olivia said, her tone as neutral as snow, "your relationship became personal when?" The room froze again. Even the music in the background seemed to dim. Nathan stiffened. "Olivia." "It's okay," Lena said softly. "We've been together for about 14 months. More murmurs. 14 months. That would place the beginning of their affair during the annual shareholder retreat in Lake Como, an event Olivia had missed only because she was recovering from a minor surgery. "Well," Olivia said, raising her glass slightly, "I appreciate your honesty." "Truly." Lena looked stunned. "You do?" "Of course," Olivia replied smoothly. "It takes courage to speak plainly, especially when the circumstances aren't conventional." Nathan's eyes narrowed. He leaned toward Lena. "This isn't going the way I thought," he whispered. "I told you she'd cry," Lena replied. "Or yell." "She's up to something," Nathan muttered. He was right. Because while Nathan thought he had made a grand announcement, claiming the next heir, solidifying his shift in legacy, Olivia had silently shifted something far more important. Power. The air crackled with questions no one dared ask. Was Olivia stepping aside? Was she playing nice? Or was she, God forbid, just getting started? By the time the second course arrived, the tension had evolved into something sharper. More dangerous. Nathan cleared his throat and stood, raising his glass. "Since we're all gathered here," he began, "I'd like to take a moment to speak about the future of Carrington Global. A future that includes international expansion, innovation, and a new generation of leadership." Olivia watched him speak, cool, confident, totally unaware that he had just walked into his own ambush. He gestured toward Lena. "Miss Wu's contributions to our East Asia strategy have been invaluable. And her role in this company's future, both personally and professionally, cannot be overstated." Lena blushed. Several guests clapped, hesitantly. Then Olivia rose. Calmly. Quietly. "Before we toast to the future," she said, voice steady, "perhaps we should clarify what that future looks like, for the board, for our children, and for the next generation." Nathan's face twitched. "This isn't the time, Olivia." She smiled. "It's the perfect time." And then she reached into her clutch, pulled out a leather-bound folder, and laid it gently on the table in front of her. The gala had just become a courtroom. And Nathan Carrington had no idea he was on trial. The knife was sharpened. But Olivia wasn't swinging it, yet. Instead, she smiled. As Lena Wu hesitantly lowered herself into the seat beside Olivia, formerly reserved for foreign dignitaries and billionaire investors, Olivia turned to her with an almost maternal grace. Not a single flicker of resentment, not a shred of fury. Just calm. Poised. Present. To anyone watching, and everyone was watching, she looked like a woman in complete control. But more than that, she looked ready. Not to forgive. Not to explode. To unfold. Dinner resumed. Sort of. The waitstaff, trained to operate in presidential ballrooms and royal receptions, fumbled. One nearly dropped a tray of scallops. The sommelier forgot to decant Nathan's vintage Pinot. Olivia caught his eye and gave a soft, reassuring nod. He corrected course instantly. This was the Olivia they knew. The one who steadied rooms. The one who, paradoxically, made chaos feel composed. "I must say," Olivia said, turning to Lena as a basket of sourdough rolls arrived, "you've handled tonight very gracefully." Lena blinked, surprised. "Thank you. It's a lot." "I imagine so," Olivia replied gently, breaking bread like it was any ordinary night. Public debuts are never easy. Especially when you weren't given a proper runway to prepare. Across the table, Nathan flinched. That wasn't a compliment. That was a line drawn in silk. Lena offered a hesitant smile. "I wasn't sure what to expect." Nathan said, she trailed off. "That I'd be angry?" Olivia said, arching an eyebrow. "Or that I'd make a scene?" Lena hesitated, then nodded slightly. Olivia laughed, a soft, almost melodic sound. That would have been his plan. Public drama makes people emotional. Emotional people make mistakes. And mistakes are easy to dismiss later. She dabbed the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. But I don't make mistakes. Not in public. A shiver seemed to ripple across the room. Conversations resumed, but every fork, every wine glass, every breath was more cautious. Everyone was listening, closely. Tell me, Olivia continued, leaning in ever so slightly. Do you enjoy working with the Shanghai team? I do, Lena said, her confidence returning as the conversation shifted to business. It's a complex region, but the market potential is extraordinary. And we're developing something unique. Blending Western luxury with Eastern values. Olivia nodded slowly. A thoughtful approach. It's been a blind spot for Carrington Global for too long. Most of our East Asia ventures have been overly westernized, designed by people who think localization means adding dragons to wallpaper. That earned a few muted chuckles. Nathan shifted in his seat, trying to wrest control of the table again. Lena's strategy has already been yielding results. Our analytics team flagged early indicators of market interest just last quarter. I've read the data, Olivia said, slicing into her halibut. The engagement metrics are strong, especially among younger demographics in Guangzhou and Shenzhen. Nathan blinked. You read the data? Of course, she replied, without looking up. I've been reviewing company reports for the past 15 years. Every single one. Lena tilted her head, curious. I didn't know that. Most people don't, Olivia replied, finally meeting Nathan's gaze. That was the design. Nathan coughed once, hard. Well, if we're being transparent, I should mention I've asked the legal team to begin drafting a reorganization. We're preparing for the launch of Carrington Pacific, our new Pacific Rim subsidiary. A flicker of excitement passed through a few board members. The goal, Nathan continued, is to realign all our Asian operations under one banner. Lena will be overseeing strategic partnerships, including our liaison with the Jiao Group in Hong Kong. Olivia nodded, taking another sip of wine. Sounds ambitious. Nathan smiled, seizing the opportunity. It is. But the future demands ambition. And legacy demands evolution. He let that last word linger. Everyone heard it. Everyone saw it. This wasn't about business anymore. This was about replacing her. Of course, Olivia said softly. Though it does raise questions. Nathan's smile faltered. Such as? Succession. Legality. Ethics, Olivia said, her tone still disarmingly pleasant. I'm curious, Nathan, are you planning to formally name the child Miss Wu is carrying as your successor? Nathan's jaw twitched. That's a personal matter. But you made it public, Olivia replied gently. And this company is built on legacy. You know that. So if you're restructuring both the business and the family tree, I think it's fair that we all understand where the lines are being redrawn. The silence was thunderous. Lena's hand drifted instinctively to her stomach. Nathan reached for his wine, but it trembled slightly in his grip. From the far end of the table, Lila's voice rang out, clear, cutting, fearless. Does that mean we're not Carrington heirs anymore? Nathan froze. Jackson placed a quiet hand on his sister's wrist, but it was too late. Olivia turned to her daughter with a mother's grace and a CEO's precision. You are, sweetheart. Always. But sometimes, people forget who helped build the kingdom they want to inherit. Then she faced Nathan. The air was velvet, but her words were granite. You've declared your future tonight, Nathan. I just want to make sure everyone here understands the cost of that declaration. She turned to the board. Because if we're talking about succession, about leadership, about who really holds power. Her hand slipped beneath the table. She pulled out a slim leather portfolio, laid it gently on the tablecloth. Then we should make sure the books are open, shouldn't we? Nathan paled. The storm hadn't struck yet, but the thunder was already inside the room. Olivia didn't raise her voice. She didn't stand. She simply opened the folder. And the room, filled with billionaires, legal sharks, media consultants, and old money legacy holders, leaned in like schoolchildren at story time. Inside this packet, she began, her tone calm but chilling, you'll find copies of asset transfer records, wire instructions, and tax filings, each tracing a financial trail from Carrington Global to 3 shell corporations based in Singapore. She slid a set of copies across the table to the board chairman, the CFO, and the general counsel. The CFO took one glance and swore under his breath. Each of these entities, Olivia continued, has been formed in the last 7 months and has one common denominator, Nathan Carrington. Sole owner. Sole beneficiary. The silence in the room cracked under the weight of reality. This wasn't a petty office scandal. This was corporate betrayal at a scale worthy of handcuffs and headlines. I believe the grand total, as of last week, she added, is $56.2 million in diverted funds. Nathan laughed, too loud, too sudden. This is absurd. You're spinning business restructuring into some kind of conspiracy. Every CEO diversifies international assets. Diversifying is one thing, Olivia replied, her gaze locked onto his. Laundering them through unregistered entities is another. He stood abruptly, his chair screeching across the floor. You're jealous. That's what this is. You can't handle being replaced, so you're throwing wild accusations at the man who built this empire. I didn't build it alone? Olivia asked, feigning surprise. Because I recall reviewing every quarterly report since 2007. Editing your investor decks. Managing board relationships. I may not have worn the title, Nathan, but I certainly wore the responsibility. She turned to the general counsel. Care to explain the legal implications, Mr. Merrill? The general counsel cleared his throat and stood, adjusting his tie as if trying to buy himself a few seconds of air in a room that had suddenly run out. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, I've reviewed the documents Mrs. Carrington provided earlier this week. I also had them verified through an independent forensic accountant. I can confirm that the financial activity constitutes serious breaches of fiduciary duty and, potentially, international financial crime under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Someone at the table dropped their wine glass. Nathan's jaw tightened. You're all going to trust her? The woman who's never even held a corporate title? I haven't, Olivia said smoothly. But that's because I never needed one. My name isn't on the letterhead. It's on the trust deed. Nathan froze. What trust deed? He asked, though part of him already knew. She reached into the folder and pulled out a second document. Cream-colored paper. Hand-signed. Embossed with the family crest. The Carrington Legacy Trust, she said. Created by your father. Enacted in 2008. She let the words linger, then delivered the dagger. It gives controlling interest, 51% of voting shares, to the spouse of the acting CEO, to ensure ethical oversight of company leadership. She tapped the clause. I've been the controlling interest for 15 years, Nathan. You've simply been signing on my behalf. The CFO's face went pale. You're lying, Nathan whispered. He would have never. He did, came a voice from the far end of the room. Everyone turned. Evelyn Carrington, Nathan's stepmother and the family's longtime power broker, had arrived late and unnoticed. She stood now in a tailored charcoal suit, one hand resting calmly on her cane. I was there when your father signed it, she said. He worried that you would inherit the company but not the responsibility. He believed Olivia had the judgment you lacked. Nathan stared at her, disbelief etched into every line of his face. You knew? All this time? Of course, she said, unflinching. Your father trusted me. And he trusted her. The air was electric. Olivia remained seated, her expression unreadable. This is treason, Nathan said, voice cracking. You're staging a coup. No, Olivia replied. I'm protecting the company. From you. She stood now, slow and purposeful, and looked directly at the board. You've all wondered, over the years, how Carrington Global stayed so stable despite Nathan's unpredictability. His whims. His PR disasters. His bad investments. The answer wasn't luck. She placed both hands on the table. It was me. I've been protecting this company from behind the scenes for over a decade. And I would have kept doing so, quietly, if he hadn't forced my hand. The board chair, an old friend of Nathan's late father, finally spoke. You never told anyone? Olivia shook her head. Because I believed in legacy. In family. I believed that Nathan could be reined in, corrected, guided. She turned to Lena, who looked utterly shattered. But then he brought a pregnant mistress to a gala and tried to replace not just me, but our children, our company, and our ethics. Lena's eyes brimmed with tears. You said, this was for our child's future. Nathan tried to interject, but Olivia raised a hand. Let her speak. Lena stood slowly. Her voice trembled. You lied. About everything. You told me this was our company, that we'd build it together. But I was just a distraction. A pawn. I never meant to hurt you, Nathan began. But you did, she said. You hurt everyone. And you did it in my name. In our baby's name. She turned to Olivia. I'm sorry. Olivia nodded. You were misled. I don't hold you accountable for his choices. The general counsel stepped forward. With your permission, Mrs. Carrington, I'll begin filing for Nathan's immediate termination under breach of fiduciary duty. Olivia's reply was calm. Proceed. Nathan's face crumbled into disbelief. You can't do this. I already did, she said. He turned to the board. You're going to let this happen? The CFO responded for them all. You're lucky we're not pressing charges, yet. Security appeared at the doors. Not aggressive. Not dramatic. Just ready. Nathan backed away, stunned. His world, his title, his mistress, his illusion, was crumbling like plaster around him. You think you've won? He spat. Olivia tilted her head. I didn't win, she said. I survived. And now, I'm rebuilding, with people who understand the difference between power and purpose. As Nathan was escorted out, the silence left behind wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Because every person in that room had just watched a woman dethrone a man without raising her voice, armed only with patience, evidence, and truth. And dessert hadn't even been served yet. The tension in the room was no longer subtle. It had morphed from uneasy curiosity into full-blown disbelief, and now it teetered on the edge of something sharper, judgment. Judgment of a man who thought he could rewrite legacy behind his wife's back. Judgment of a woman who, with one folder and one forgotten clause, had flipped the power structure of a billion-dollar empire like a switch. And at the center of it all stood David Lang, Carrington Global's long-serving chief legal officer. Stoic. Calculated. Trusted. He stood now, holding a set of documents in one hand and a stack of printed proxy statements in the other. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, he began, his voice crisp and direct, I've been asked to confirm the legal standing of the Carrington Legacy Trust and the authority it conveys to Mrs. Olivia Carrington. Every eye was on him. Except Nathan's. He was staring at Olivia, as if willing her to vanish, to undo the past 5 minutes with a blink. According to Section 7B of the trust deed, which was signed and notarized in 2008 by the late Charles Carrington, Lang continued, voting control, defined as 51% of Class A shares, was placed into a protective trust. That trust named the CEO's lawful spouse as the sole trustee during marriage, to ensure ethical oversight. Nathan scoffed. That clause was never exercised. Lang raised an eyebrow. It has. You've simply been unaware. Olivia Carrington has submitted proxies on your behalf at every annual board vote since 2008, each one legally binding, each one co-signed by this office for verification. He held up a binder. We have 15 years of filings. The air in the room went thick. Nathan took a step forward, his face flushed. You're telling me she's had control this entire time? Lang didn't blink. Yes. Quietly. Strategically. Legally. A few board members shifted in their seats. Murmurs rippled. Olivia remained seated, her posture impossibly poised. She looked neither smug nor smugly silent. She looked done. Like a woman who had held back for years and was now simply letting the truth speak for itself. Nathan's voice cracked. This is a betrayal. No, Nathan, Olivia replied, calm as ever. What you did was betrayal. I'm just making it public. Lang continued. Based on the breach of fiduciary duty detailed in the forensic report, embezzlement, misrepresentation, and the unauthorized formation of foreign shell companies, the trust authorizes the trustee to remove the acting CEO in the interest of protecting company assets. He turned to the board. As of this moment, Mrs. Carrington has executed that clause. There was a stunned pause. Effective immediately, he declared, Nathan Carrington is removed as CEO of Carrington Global. Silence. Total silence. Even the background music had faded, as if the speakers themselves were stunned. Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it. His world, so carefully crafted, was collapsing one clause at a time. You don't have the authority. I am the authority, Olivia replied, rising to her feet. And you'd know that, if you had ever bothered to read the fine print. One of the board members coughed awkwardly. Another picked up a linen napkin and started folding it, nervously, into a triangle. Even the background music had faded, as if the speakers themselves were stunned. Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it. His world, so carefully crafted, was collapsing one clause at a time. You don't have the authority. I am the authority, Olivia replied, rising to her feet. And you'd know that, if you had ever bothered to read the fine print. One of the board members coughed awkwardly. Another picked up a linen napkin and started folding it, nervously, into a triangle. David Lang stepped aside. Security has been briefed. If Mr. Carrington requires assistance in collecting his personal items, arrangements have been made. At that, two plainclothes security officers entered the ballroom. Not aggressive. Not intimidating. But resolute. Nathan looked around, at Lena, who now sat frozen, her hands shaking. At the board, who stared down at the documents in stunned resignation. At his children, who stood quietly beside Olivia, offering no defense. Olivia, he said, voice cracking. Don't do this. But Olivia didn't respond to the plea. She responded to the truth. I didn't do this, Nathan. You did. You betrayed our vows. You betrayed our company. You betrayed our children. And worst of all, you underestimated me. The room held its breath. Nathan didn't fight. He didn't storm. He simply sagged. Shoulders sinking under the weight of a reality he never thought he'd face. As he was quietly escorted from the room, no one followed. No one called his name. No one applauded. Only Olivia remained standing, taller than ever. The empire hadn't just changed hands. It had revealed its true ruler. And her name wasn't Nathan. It was Olivia. Lena Wu sat motionless in her chair, her hands folded tightly over her belly as if bracing against a storm only she could feel. The empire she thought she was entering had vanished. The man who promised her legacy had been escorted out like a failed intern. The child she carried, the one Nathan had called the next Carrington heir, now felt like a pawn in someone else's board game. Across the room, the guests murmured, the legal team packed up, and the board shuffled papers, already moving into damage control mode. But at the center of it all, between half-finished entrees and spilled wine, Lena sat frozen in the fallout. Until a soft voice broke through. "Would you walk with me?" It was Olivia. Lena turned, startled. What? Olivia stood beside her, offering not a hand, not a hug, but something more powerful, a way forward. "Just for a moment," Olivia said gently. They stepped out onto the terrace, the city lights of San Francisco glowing like distant fires below them. The chill in the air did nothing to dull the weight between them. "I didn't know," Lena said at last, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I swear, Olivia. He told me you didn't care. That the marriage was just for show. That you were distant, cold. He told me the same thing about you," Olivia replied, not unkindly. "That it was a passing thing. A mistake." They stood in silence for a beat. Then Lena asked the question that had been clawing at her since the moment the truth detonated in that ballroom. "Why aren't you angry?" Olivia looked out at the skyline, her jaw tightening ever so slightly. "Oh, I'm angry," she said. "But not at you. Not anymore." Lena turned to her, searching her face. "Then who?" Olivia's lips curled into a bittersweet smile. "At myself. For believing him. For allowing him to walk through boardrooms with my signature while convincing me it was safer to stay in the shadows. For letting him rewrite my story while I stayed quiet to protect his." She turned to Lena, eyes clear and unflinching. "But I will not make that mistake again. Not with my company. Not with my children. Not with you." Lena's throat tightened. "With me?" Olivia nodded. "You're carrying a child connected to mine. That makes us family, whether either of us wanted it or not." Lena blinked, stunned. You're not going to cut me off?" "I should," Olivia said honestly. "It would be easier. Cleaner. But that child didn't lie. That child didn't steal." She paused. "And that child deserves better than a legacy built on betrayal." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes. "I don't know what to do." "Start over," Olivia said, softly but firmly. "Not as someone's secret, but as someone's mother. Someone who gets to define her own life." "I feel like a fool." "You're not a fool," Olivia said, "you were just misled. Like the rest of us." Another silence. Then Lena asked, "So what happens now?" Olivia reached into her clutch and handed over a simple envelope. "My private number. And the name of a very good legal advisor, one who specializes in parental rights and legacy trust law. I've already asked our team to ensure your child is acknowledged as part of the Carrington bloodline, legally. But that doesn't mean Nathan gets a pass." Lena opened the envelope with shaking hands. "Why are you doing this?" Olivia's voice dropped lower. "Because power without compassion is just cruelty. And I won't model cruelty, not for my kids, and not for yours." For the first time, Lena allowed the tears to fall. Quiet, but real. "I wanted to belong to something," she whispered. "I thought this baby would anchor me. Give me a place." Olivia looked her in the eyes. "You still can. But it won't be because of Nathan. It will be because of you." Lena nodded, slowly. Then, with a courage she didn't know she had, she asked, "Would you help me?" Olivia didn't hesitate. Yes. The two women stood there a while longer, not friends, not enemies, but something harder to define. Two women burned by the same fire. Two women choosing not to burn each other. As they stepped back into the ballroom, heads turned. Whispers sparked. But Olivia kept her head high. And Lena walked one step behind, not as a secret, not as a shame, but as a woman reclaiming her narrative. At the far end of the room, Jackson and Lila looked up, their mother meeting their gaze with the softest smile they'd seen in weeks. Everything was broken. But maybe, just maybe, something better was beginning. The boardroom on the 61st floor of Carrington Global was quiet, too quiet for a building that once pulsed with Nathan's overconfidence. Gone were the over-polished monologues, the unnecessary showmanship, the thinly veiled bravado passed off as vision. Now, something deeper filled the space, clarity. At exactly 9 a.m., Olivia Carrington entered the room. No flash. No entourage. Just presence. She wore a tailored charcoal pantsuit, sharper than steel and just as unbending. A single sapphire pin, the same stone from her wedding ring, now repurposed, now symbolic, rested on her lapel. Behind her followed David Lang, chief legal officer, and two independent auditors who had reviewed the embezzlement files. But it was Olivia who commanded the room, not with volume, but with gravity. Harold Monroe, the board chairman, rose from his seat as Olivia approached. "Mrs. Carrington," he said, gesturing toward the head of the table, "this chair is yours." She nodded once, firmly, and took her place. Her first words weren't about control. They weren't about revenge. They were about vision. "Let me be clear," she began, "I didn't ask for this role. I didn't lobby for it. I didn't scheme for it. I was prepared for it. There's a difference." She paused, letting that sink in. "For 15 years, I played the role the world expected of me, the CEO's wife. The smiling host. The supporter in the wings. But I wasn't silent because I had nothing to say. I was silent because I was watching. Listening. Learning." She held up a thick white folder. "This is the roadmap for Carrington Global 2.0. It includes not just recovery plans for the misappropriated assets, but an entirely new framework for governance, one that reflects the future, not the ego of one man." David Lang distributed copies to the board. Inside, a complete breakdown of a new operating structure. Transparent. Modern. Fair. "And this," Olivia continued, sliding a second, sealed envelope across the table, "is the founding document of the Carrington Legacy Trust." There were murmurs. "The trust will hold 51% of Carrington Global's shares, permanently," she explained. "It will be governed by a rotating council of board members, executive leadership, and, when eligible, Carrington family descendants. It ensures the company can never again be hijacked by any single individual, regardless of last name." She looked around the table. "This isn't just about reclaiming what Nathan almost destroyed. This is about protecting what we're still building. For our employees. For our partners. For our children." Victoria Liang, the youngest board member and a fierce advocate for ethical business, leaned forward. "And who oversees the trust?" "I will, temporarily," Olivia said. "But only until an independent oversight committee is formed. I've already tapped a short list of candidates. Experts in ethics, sustainability, and international law." Harold raised an eyebrow. "So you're not holding power indefinitely?" Olivia shook her head. "No empire should be ruled by one voice forever. That's how dynasties collapse. I'm here to lead the transition, not to install a new monarch." Someone chuckled, lightly, almost nervously. But the tension had begun to ease. This wasn't theater. This was stewardship. "And your family?" asked one board member, cautiously. What happens to your children's stake? Olivia's voice softened, but didn't weaken. Jackson and Lila are 18. They'll have opportunities within the company if they choose to earn them. Not because of their name, but because of their effort. No free passes. No silver spoons. If they want a future here, they'll build it, brick by brick. And Nathan's child, someone dared to ask. The room held its breath. Olivia didn't flinch. The child Lena is carrying will be acknowledged legally. As a Carrington. With equal inheritance protections, not because of Nathan, but because I won't allow a child to be punished for the sins of a father. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Because power wasn't being hoarded. It was being redefined. Olivia then turned to Victoria. I'd also like to create a new branch of Carrington Global. A foundation. Focused on ethical entrepreneurship and mentorship for young women in business. Victoria blinked. You mean, like a scholarship program? Bigger, Olivia said. Access. Coaching. Capital. Everything I never had when I started in finance before I met Nathan. One of the auditors smiled. That sounds revolutionary. No, Olivia replied. That sounds overdue. As the meeting drew to a close, the board voted unanimously to ratify her position as CEO. The room erupted into soft applause, not performative, but deeply earned. Olivia stood once more. One last thing, she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. This company was never supposed to be about one man's vision. It was about innovation. Community. Integrity. That's what we're returning to. That's the legacy I will leave. And with that, the meeting ended. But the real legacy? It was just beginning. Later that evening, in a more intimate setting, her newly redesigned executive suite, Olivia stood by the window, watching as fog drifted over the Golden Gate. The city below blinked with energy, but for the first time in a long time, her heart wasn't racing. It was calm. Lena entered the room quietly. Her belly now obvious. Her face uncertain. I heard, she said softly. Congratulations. Thank you, Olivia replied, offering her a seat. They spoke briefly. Respectfully. Two women who could have been enemies, now bonded by what they both had to protect. Is it weird, Lena asked, that part of me feels safe now? Olivia smiled faintly. Not weird. Just human. Lena exhaled slowly. I want to do better. For him. For the baby. You will, Olivia said. You already are. And for a moment, the legacy of Carrington wasn't about wealth. Or boardrooms. Or trust funds. It was about resilience. About women who refused to shatter even when the glass ceilings rained down on them. The city skyline glowed like a living monument, glass and steel monuments built on ambition, risk, and legacy. From her office on the 61st floor, Olivia Carrington stood alone, one hand resting lightly on the cool pane of glass, the other holding a small silver ring once worn as a symbol of marriage. Now, it was just metal. A reminder. Not a regret. The gala. The takedown. The restructuring. It was done. Nathan had signed the separation agreement, begrudgingly, bitterly. He'd taken the penthouse in Aspen, a team of PR consultants, and what was left of his dignity. Lena had accepted a consulting role in Hong Kong, with legal and financial security ensured for her and the child she would raise without illusions. Jackson and Lila were enrolled in leadership programs within the company, shadowing department heads, not as heirs, but as students. The dust had settled. But the empire had only just begun. As Olivia stepped into the Carrington Global Press briefing 2 days later, cameras clicked. Reporters whispered. Social media was already ablaze with headlines. CEO removed in midnight coup? Wife of tech mogul assumes control in bold legal move. Meet the woman who outsmarted Silicon Valley's most powerful man. But Olivia wasn't here to bask in noise. She was here to redefine what power looked like. She stepped behind the podium, took a breath, and began. Some of you may be expecting a revenge story, she said. A betrayal story. A scandal. But this isn't that. Her voice was low, calm. But every syllable landed like a gavel. This isn't a woman scorned. This is a leader prepared. And this isn't about one man losing control, it's about a company regaining its compass. Behind her, a new slogan had been installed in brushed chrome across the wall. Carrington Global, led by integrity, not ego. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. For 18 years, I stood beside a man who was hailed as a visionary. But what you didn't see, what he never saw, was that while he was chasing spotlight, I was building structure. While he gave speeches, I read the fine print. While he played power games, I studied the rules. She let that linger. It wasn't revenge. It was leadership. Earned through 18 years of watching, waiting, and knowing exactly when to strike. One camera flash. Then two. Then the room erupted. But Olivia remained steady. She wasn't done. I didn't take control to settle scores. I took it to reset standards. For my children. For our 11,000 employees. For every woman who's ever been called just the wife in rooms she helped build. Reporters leaned forward. Phones lit up. And for the record, she added, voice softening, this isn't a female leadership story. This is a competence story. A strategy story. A story about a woman who was underestimated until she wasn't. She stepped back from the podium. No mic drop. No forced smile. Just truth. The real kind. That afternoon, Carrington Global's stock rose 18%. Investor trust surged. And Olivia received an invitation to speak at the World Economic Forum under the topic, Quiet Power, Building Empires Without the Applause. That evening, she returned to her office. The building was nearly empty, executives gone home, the city below twinkling like a breathing thing. There, she found a small envelope on her desk. No return address. Just her name. Inside, a note, in Nathan's handwriting. Asterisk, you played the long game. You won. But tell me honestly, was it worth it? Asterisk. Olivia stared at the paper for a long moment. Then she turned it over and wrote one sentence. It was never a game. She folded the note, placed it back in the envelope, and dropped it in the shredder. Some endings don't deserve replies. Later, she sat with Lila and Jackson on their apartment balcony. They didn't talk about Nathan. They didn't need to. They talked about leadership programs. About mistakes and second chances. About Lena, who had sent an ultrasound photo earlier that day with a message. He kicked when your speech started. You're already a role model. Olivia smiled softly. Not for the cameras. Not for the press. Just for herself. And maybe for the little life she'd decided to protect, even if he carried the DNA of a man she no longer trusted. Because leadership wasn't about control. It was about responsibility. And love, when given without permission or applause. She looked at her kids and said quietly, you don't inherit legacy. You earn it. And they believed her. Because they'd watched her earn it, not in a courtroom or a spotlight, but in silence, in strength, and in strategy. The empire had a new face now. Not because a crown was handed to her, but because she forged it herself. And when history wrote the story of Carrington Global, the real chapter wouldn't be about a fall. It would be about a rise. One woman. One trust clause. One perfectly timed storm. And a future that started with a whisper, but ended with an empire.